Hi everyone. Firstly, I'd like to apologise for not being there in real time. I'm doing a co-design workshop with Griffith University today. I'd also like to acknowledge before I start that the presentation was developed and I'm delivering it from the traditional lands of the Darug and Gandangara people, and I pay my respect to elders past, present and future. I'm going to start by asking some questions, actually, that I'm not going to directly answer, but I'm going to reflect on them in the context of my research into Sino-Australian design collaboration. I should note that I now have just over 20 years experience working and living in China. So, what assumptions do we make when we're entering a collaboration, designing research, or instigating co-design projects? And how do our assumptions influence our methods and the success of a collaboration? How do our collaboration methods shape the way we design the world? I think we can all agree that we tend to make assumptions about others. Between 2008 and 2012, I conducted 3 field studies investigating transcultural and interdisciplinary collaboration in design education, with academics and industry stakeholders from China, Australia, Europe, and the US. And the first of these tested collaborative online processes. One insight that emerged was contributed by Espen Sivertsen, a designer from the Innovation Lab in Copenhagen, who was participating as an industry mentor in the project, and he observed that in fact we were trying to bridge multiple realities. Our multiple realities impact all participants' expectations of a collaboration and our capacity to contribute, and are shaped by social identity, cultural and relational processes, our role, for example, whether we're from industry, whether we're an academic, a teacher, a mentor, or a student. To be honest, I didn't really understand the implications of this at the time. The anthropologists Hall and Hall's notion of low and context cultures helped me to reflect further on this and how communication processes impact collaboration. In low context cultures, like Australia, we tend to communicate very directly, and what we're permitted to communicate is not overly dominated by social context. In high context cultures, like Confucius heritage societies, meaning is often implicit and communication is context dependent. One has to understand the context to understand what's happening and what you can or should do. And given where Hall and Hall placed China and Australia on their low-high context spectrum, one can begin to sense the significant differences in how we communicate and the high likelihood of assumptions being made and challenged, and the subsequent complexity in collaborating. If we do inhabit multiple realities, it's not a huge leap to suggest this as a significant contributing factor in not only situations like the current high-level impasse between, say, Australia and China, but also how we face complex, wicked problems of collaboration like interdisciplinarity, or tackling grand challenges with global implications like rapid urbanization or trust. Manzini's lament that we lack common ideas of what sustainable futures might actually look like, his notion of shared vision, a concept most of you will be familiar with, this has been an underlying motivator for me trying to create these collaborative spaces, finding ways to design with better. This is also a good moment to acknowledge John Wood's notion of joined-up approaches to sustained futures that imply a redesign of design itself, fundamentally based in collaboration. Of course, formulating joined-up approaches that enable collaboration is complexified by myriad factors, including those that I'm reflecting on today. Out of the case studies, I developed a framework for transcultural and interdisciplinary design collaboration. There are aspects of this model that are definitely changed now, as I'll elaborate on, but despite that, I find it still useful in discussing collaboration methods. Essentially, no one collaborates with people they don't trust for very long. And investing time into building trust is important for collaboration. And time is especially significant in Confucius heritage cultures. There's a metaphor about the 3 cups of tea. It comes from industry, and basically it's about going through a process of having 3 metaphorical cups of tea with potential partners, and by the time the 3rd cup of tea is attended, a collaboration is more likely. When I talk about my work, people inevitably bring up language, and of course they're right to. It's critical and links back so essentially to the forming of assumptions and subsequent misunderstandings. With a few exceptions, I've found the greatest proportion of bilingual participants were those based in China. Despite our multiculturalism and the great diversity of languages spoken in Australia, Anglo-Australians at least tend not to be very bilingual. However, bilingual people still face issues because terminologies and concepts used in different social, cultural, and industry contexts don't necessarily correspond to their understandings, their realities. And it's also very difficult to find translators with discipline-specific knowledge. However, reformulating John Wood's notion of relanguaging design as co-languaging does to some extent ameliorate some of the challenges of language in collaboration. By activating and sharing images, artifacts, and visual media like drawings, photography, video sketching, mappings, rapid prototypes, picture presentations, all of these can become co-languaging tools. Understood as boundary objects, and I'm referencing Starr and Greismer's theoretical take on that here, these tools and processes combine to provide opportunities for intensive co-languaging, which lead to more shared understandings and meanings in a collaboration. So based on my research experiences to date, I feel confident arguing the sketch, the video, and the photograph can emerge in these contexts as shared objects to talk about and think with, that different cultural groups, user groups, and communities of practice can use in differing ways that reflect our multiple realities, but also function as enablers of communication and interpersonal engagement as the foundation for successful design and collaboration. These images are of rapid prototypes from MetaPlace, my current research project. They're actually very interesting links between the use of media and culture. For example, I was checking for cultural bias and currency around Hall & Hall's high-low context culture spectrum, and I found a study from this year by Yang, Hu, and Arth, who confirmed the veracity of the high-low context cultures, but also found that people in different cultures perceive the same communication mediums differently. So as I've found, the aim is to create a communication sandpit where collaborators can find their people and their media and tools. Not only do boundary objects emerge to assist communication, from repeated observations, I can confirm that some individuals emerge as boundary agents, who, as McNee, Van Nodvik, and Clark assert, enhance the linkages between various forms of knowledge and action, thus increasing the usefulness of information for decisions and therefore improving outcomes. This is a schematic of the research design from my current research into Sino-Australian co-design for participatory urban planning. It's based on a model by Fisher, Giacardi, and Ye and their metadesign manifesto for end-user development. Insights from my study have revealed how inadequate such reductive models are for guiding us in collaboration and co-design, particularly in transcultural and interdisciplinary contexts. COVID-19 has, of course, delayed and redirecting the testing in the wild that you can see in the research plan between the iterative response stages 1 and 2. But this has permitted more time for critically unpacking the initial collaborative co-design stage, outlined in red there. Reflecting upon assumptions I made in designing the research methods and my role as a design researcher in Chongqing, which is essentially a city with a unique local culture little understood in the West, prompts complex questions about which co-design processes are legitimate in, as this mapping from one participant hints at, the complex relational high context of the study. It's at the points of human interaction, the original schematic's apparent depiction of straightforward, open-ended, low-context cooperation fails, because it renders invisible critical factors, including cultural dynamics, social and professional hierarchies, traditional ways of living, and power relations that determine or otherwise shape interactions between participants and participants and researchers. So I just want to note that this is a work in progress, but I continue to work on unpacking this to better represent events within the co-design stage of the research. The aim is augmentation of the schematic model to make more visible the negotiation, collaborative planning, and the challenging of assumptions to better illustrate and position how design researchers, who are inevitably interfering agents, how can they engage more effectively using a pluriversal approach to designing with? But to go further, I've been fortunate to co-author a paper on this with Luona Zhang and Associate Professor Fang Xu recently. Zhang in particular highlights the incongruence of Eurocentric low-context methods with the social identities that shape local participants' multiple high-context realities, influencing in to varying degrees framing or limiting their approaches, responses, and the way they contribute to a collaborative process. I'm influenced here by Gatt and Ingold's understanding of participatory processes as anthropology by means of design, where our role as co-creator is underpinned by reflexive, mindful participation within the co-creation, not as the ethnographic researcher outside the process recording what happens. Now, I know that this is opening up into a space where there's a lot more to be said, but I'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you.